Well, hello, everybody. I'm a little late getting started here because I had some technical difficulty getting this up and running today. Welcome to episode 1, relaunch episode of the Common American Podcast. Now, the Common American Technology Podcast. So I'm going to do one quick thing real quickly here because I did not start my audio recording, and then we will start the official show. So just keep in mind when you're watching these videos, this is me recording an audio podcast. Now I'm going to try to keep the videos as succinct as possible and not do too many gaps and spaces and things like that in my thought process. But the truth of the matter is, this is me recording an audio podcast, so keep that in mind. The video is not intended to be the final product. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start Audacity and do a couple quick things, and then we will get going here. File. Okay. Test. Audio's coming through. Awesome. All right. Welcome to the Common American Technology Podcast for September 9th, 2016. Apple without the jack. I'm here to bring you the 2 or 3 top tech stories of the week in a way to help you understand how technology is shaping our society. This show is for every man and woman. I am John Bailey, and I consider myself a serial technologist. I'm an IT professional. I've been interested in technologies from a very young age. I've had my ear on the technology, my ear and my eye on the technology and gadget world since I was 10 years old, when I started messing with my dad's VCR and made him mad. So I broke a VCR when they were expensive. Not a good idea. I'm also a guy who thinks technology is kind of outpacing society. Not everyone understands technology, but everyone has to use it in this day and age. And I'm a guy who realizes that while I understand all this stuff and I love all this stuff, not everybody does. I have a mom who is of an age when everything was manual. Everything was manual. I mean, cars were manual. 3 on the tree. She drove a car that was 3 on the tree at one point. If you can imagine driving a stick shift but not on the floor, the gear shift, which you had to put the clutch in and shift, was on the column. And there's many people out there who've driven a 3 on the tree of my mom's age who would completely understand that concept. Something I can't imagine trying to do, but that's one tiny example in a huge world of technology that is really outpacing not only society's ability to understand what's going on with technology, but also outpacing our own sort of ability to cope with what's going on in the technology world. When I say that, one of the common threads in modern technology is trolling. That's something that happens way too frequently. Trolling is an internet phenomenon, and it's not even intentional. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just people wanting to get things off their chest and not knowing how to do it in a productive way. You wouldn't say to a person in front of their face, "You're an idiot." Well, most people wouldn't. Most common, everyday people would not walk up to you and say, "You're an idiot. You're a dumbass," for lack of a better term. "You're ugly, you're stupid, you're this, you're that," but we feel fine saying that on YouTube or on Facebook. So that's one of the things that have, throughout the overall arcing thread of how this show is going to go, I'll touch on a little bit. But the purpose of the show every week is to bring a news story or two to you of the week and talk about it and hopefully help you understand how to break it down and understand it at its base level without being too technical. That's the problem you hear about when you hear Apple launch stuff, like which is the story I'm talking about this week. Apple launched the Apple Watch 2 and the iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 Pro. And you're going to hear a lot of gigabytes and gigabits and storage and megapixels. And for the average consumer, especially with that stuff nowadays, if you're buying in that price range of phone, it doesn't matter. If you're going to buy a phone that costs $400 to $700, which is the base price for the iPhones, you're going to get a good quality phone. So you're going to get a pretty good camera. You're going to get a pretty good screen. You're going to get a decent audio quality out of it. You're going to get all of the bells and whistles that you expect. So all those gigabytes and megapixels don't add up to anything for the average consumer. Now, to me, it matters because I'm a techie. I want the most gigabits, most gigabytes, the most megapixels. You know, that's why I have a Nexus phone, which I'll get into that in a little bit, what a Nexus phone is. But I want to start off with what Apple's announcement was. And you'll see if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching this on my Facebook page, I'll add a comment with this information in it. But I'll also put it in the description underneath in YouTube. Once the video is completely recorded, it'll also be on my website underneath the video so that you can follow these links and read up on them. But the Apple announcement announced basically three things. One, new Apple iPhone 7. The Apple iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, both, they have decided to eliminate the headphone jack. Now, for the most part, a lot of people are panicking about this. And here's why it's not that big a deal. Now, I'm using an Android phone for my audio that plays the music for this podcast. Now, in order for me to do that and do it properly, I'm using the headphone jack. However, if I had a USB output interface, it actually might be a little bit better quality because you're taking an analog signal, converting it to digital into my computer. If it's digital to begin with, the digital audio converter or DAC built into the phone has to do far less work, and the signal is cleaner. This drives a lot of people crazy, but what you need to understand is that most modern cars are coming with things that are wireless, interfaces that are wireless, so you can hook your phone up to your car. Most average consumers are not hooking headsets up to their phones. Now, are some people? Yes. Do I? Yes. I'm wearing a set of headsets, actually, strangely enough. This is an Apple headset. It came with an iPhone. Actually, I think it came with my iPad. But I digress. It's an Apple headset. The technical people out there, the people who nitpick on every little thing about these phones are going to tell you that this is the death knell for Apple. It's not. Now, there is one area in which this is a problem for Apple. One of the things that have been coming out for all phones, not just for Apple, but other devices as well, Android, are things like card readers that hook into the headphone jack of the phone and use sort of audio and electrical signals through that headphone jack to do things like take transactions, to take credit card payments. One of them is called a Square reader. It's the most common credit card reader that you can attach to an iPhone or an Android to take credit card payments using your phone. There are other devices out there that do the same thing, but they all use that headphone jack. Now, if you suddenly want to continue doing that with Apple, now you've got to interface with their port on the bottom of the phone, which is what they call their Lightning port. Most people would call it, most people who know a little bit about computers might call it the Apple USB port. It's kind of the same thing. In fact, when you hook anything up to an Apple device, except for another Apple device, you are going to use a Lightning to USB cord. So it's Lightning on one end, which is that little weird flat connector, and then it's USB, which is the square connector on the other end. That is how everything's going to have to be hooked up to the phone, that or wirelessly moving forward. Period. That's how Apple's moving forward. And don't be surprised if this happens. It's not going to happen quickly, but it is going to happen on the iPads too. It's going to. And unfortunately, all these device makers are going to move in that direction, especially with people demanding things like water resistance in their phones. You can't have a headphone jack that's exposed and have a water-resistant phone. It just doesn't work. Now, the other thing that Apple did was they came out on their one of the two phones, which I'm going to admit, I have a link in the show notes that gives all of the information about what was released by Apple. But one of the things that they came out with was a Airbud wireless USB headphone set. But it's two separate headphones, I believe. Again, you have to read up on this, but it's their proprietary USB, or excuse me, not USB, but Bluetooth headset. Itty bitty tiny thing. Smallest Bluetooth headset I've seen. Looks really cool. $130. You can buy a set of Bluetooth headsets that do pretty much the same thing for about $50. That's classic Apple. That's sort of what I'm leading into with my next sort of realm with this, because also within that Apple announcement, they came out with the new Apple Watch 2. And again, trying to make it waterproof. They did a lot of different things to try to make it waterproof. They made the battery last longer. It's still a $300 investment for the average watch. That's for a watch. Which, if it was compatible and all of the features worked with all of my other devices, great. Perfect. I would love to buy an Apple Watch. I really would. But it's not going to be compatible with everything out there. It just isn't. It's Apple's way of doing things. Apple loves to sort of create this environment where everything works with each other perfectly. And I will say, almost dead ringer perfect. Every Apple device works with every other Apple device in existence without question every time. Only with Apple. If you try to pair that Apple headset with a Samsung phone, the Bluetooth portion of that will work. Everything about the audio will work. All of the little advanced features that they're going to have will not work. So, for instance, it probably won't allow you to queue up. Now, I had a pair of $20 Bluetooth headsets that would queue up my Samsung phone. So, when I had a Samsung, I would hit a button, and it would bring up Google Now. So, I'd hit the button and go bling, bling, and I could say, okay, Google, call Mom. By the way, if I just queued up your phone and told it to call your mother, I apologize. But it won't work. I guarantee you it won't, because it's not something Apple supports. That's one of the things that a lot of the other industry, Amazon's doing that kind of thing as well. You'll notice this, you can buy streaming media players on Amazon.com, but only the ones that include Amazon Prime Video. Now, most of those happen to be the better ones out there in existence. The Roku devices, Apple itself. There's a few other ones, but Roku is the biggie. And of course the Fire TV, which personally, these are all devices you can use that you can buy from Amazon. But Amazon won't sell you a device that doesn't come with the Amazon player built in. Apple won't sell you a device that doesn't or won't connect properly with other Apple devices, and they won't let another manufacturer connect to their device unless they follow Apple's very strict guidelines. One of those guidelines, going back to the Square reader, because it's not using any Apple proprietary anything, they don't have to pay Apple a dime. Well, now, if you're going to connect to the Lightning port on that Apple phone, you're going to have to pay Apple a licensing fee for the communications protocol over which that's going to be transmitted. So, in other words, Square will be able to make it work, but now Square's business model is dependent upon Apple. And in Apple history, one of the things that they've tended to do is charge industry high fees for everything. One of those examples is in-app purchases within the iTunes store. Apple gets something like 30% of every purchase. If they do something like that with a Square reader, it effectively causes Square to no longer have a viable business model through Apple. And they would possibly lose a third to half their business at that point. So it's a big deal in that realm. From a user standpoint, from 90% of the users out there, losing that headphone jack honestly isn't going to matter that much. I pair my phones to various Bluetooth devices I own. I very rarely hook a headset up to my phone anymore. I do occasionally, but very rarely. And that's becoming more and more frequent. I bought a Bluetooth headset so I could mow without having a cord going from my head to my phone. Or exercise, which is something I'm allergic to. So I wanted to talk quite a bit about what Apple's coming up with, so that I can kind of prepare you to understand not just Apple, but what else is out there besides Apple. Well, Android is out there. Or, to be a little bit more clear, there's a lot more out there. Now, the second link I'm posting here after the Apple announcement is a link to a comparison of primarily the Apple and the Samsung watches. And there's a huge list of those watches out there. But Samsung S3, which is coming out probably around the same time as the Apple Watch 2, and probably going to be very similarly priced. Now, they very smartly didn't announce the price for the Samsung Galaxy Watch S3 yet. And the reason they didn't announce the price is because they were waiting for Apple to announce the Watch 2 so that they could undercut it, most likely, or at least match it pretty closely. And in many ways, it's a better device. I would actually own this device. A couple of the things that come up. It's a watch. It'll pair with any device. It's actually got a cellular antenna in it for making 911 calls. It's got GPS built into the watch, so you can separate yourself from your phone. You can use this thing aside from your phone. Now the Apple Watch, they included GPS too, but my understanding is it's a little bit more proprietary. With the Samsung watch, it's using an operating system called Tizen, which is long history, long time ago, was developed by, I want to say Nokia, but it's an open source operating system that was initially developed to be used for phones, but modified because of its lightweight to be used in watches and other small devices. It is a very fast phone, and its interface is, I think, nicer. The bezel, you twist it to change your functions. It's a touchscreen, of course. It's going to be priced similarly. Again, it's a $300 watch, but it's going to have a lot more functional capability, and it's going to last for 4 or 5 days on a charge. That's not a day. That's 4 or 5 days on a charge. If you have to charge your watch every night, it's not worth it. If I maybe forget and I let it go 3 or 4 days and then it dies, oh, that's my fault. If I put my watch on in the morning and by the time I get home at night it's already dead, that's a problem. So that's the other thing, is that they're saying 18 hours on an Apple Watch. Well, I've had some long days, especially when traveling. I've had some days that started at 4 in the morning getting on an airplane, and I didn't end up hitting the sack in a hotel room until 1 a.m. the following morning. So, and that was back when I traveled for a living. That watch would be dead. That watch would not make it through that. What purpose would that serve me? It's, if you're going to have a watch, you need to have something that'll function for you at all times, and it will be completely reliable and useful to you as a timepiece. And the other thing that they're doing with that Samsung watch is, once it gets down to a certain point in battery, it shuts everything but the clock off. So it's a watch. Before all else, at the end of all else, it's a watch. It does other things. I'd buy that. But there's a lot of other devices out there that are far less expensive, and that's why I posted a link to the CNET story. And that is kind of where I'm leading with this, is for the same money you pay with Apple, you can get as good or better devices for the same price or less. Then this is, leading into that, talking about the Samsung watch and other watches. If you're gonna buy an Android phone, here's the thing with Android phones. If you talk to somebody who's sort of in the know, and you're going to get 1,000 opinions about this out there. If you buy an Android phone, you're going to get Android problems. I'll be quite honest. One thing that Apple devices will always give you is that they are the easiest to use. They tell you what you can and what you can't do. Well, with Android, you can do anything you want to, but that makes it more convoluted. Apple tells you, this is how it works, just use it. Well, for somebody who doesn't understand technology, that works great. For somebody who actually wants to make the device do something outside the norm, outside the box, it's not great. It's frustrating. When I want to make that Apple device play something on my television, I can make it happen, but it doesn't happen naturally. With an Android device, I can just flat out do it. It's easy. It's almost too easy. And I've done some videos on my other YouTube channel that show that, and on my Facebook page showing me connecting my phone to my television over a $30 dongle called a Google Chromecast. So Apple devices are perfect in many ways for people who just want their technology to work. And Apple watches everything that comes into and out of its app store. So if you buy an Apple Watch or an iPhone and you download apps onto that phone, you're not going to get apps that are overly invasive into your life, because Apple doesn't allow that. You're not going to get apps that may cause pop-ups on your phone, because Apple doesn't allow that. You're not going to get apps that allow you to do things to your phone that might be harmful to it, because Apple doesn't allow that. With Android, much the same as with a PC, with a Windows-based PC, you're going to get a huge variety of options. And for people who think they aren't going to be capable of figuring those options out, it's scary. The problem is that for simplicity, you're paying close to double the price for an Apple device that honestly is not even up to the standard in technology that Google provides on most of its phones. And that's why I posted a link to the upcoming Google phones. Now, before I mentioned that I have a Nexus phone, and it's on the charger in the other room, or I'd show it to you. But One of the things with Nexus, one of the things you have to keep in mind, Google makes their own phones now. They have for a while. And they usually have, just like Apple does, they've got their lower end phone and they've got their higher end phone. So it was the 7, it was a 6 and 6 Plus, and now the 7 and 7 Pro. Same concept. So I've got a Nexus 5X, which is the lower end of the two Android phones made directly by Google. And in the past, they've always called their made by Google, and I want to clarify this. Google doesn't actually manufacture these phones. They pay other companies to manufacture them for them. In this case, LG made my Nexus 5X, but it's branded as a Nexus phone. And in the past, when you wanted a pure Google phone, you always bought a Nexus phone. They're rebranding those as Pixel because that's moving forward. Everything made by Google will be called a Pixel. But they've got new Pixel phones coming out. Now, why am I mentioning Pixel phones? Why am I mentioning Google phones? Because there's a huge variety of Android phones out there, and you can go on to AT&T's website, you can go into T-Mobile's website, you can walk into Walmart, you can walk into Target, any retail store, and buy a huge plethora from anywhere from $40 or $50 all the way up to $600 without contract, all these other things. None of that is pure Google phone. And here's why it's better to buy the pure Google phone, because you are getting the equivalent of an iPhone. You really are. You're getting a phone that's going to immediately get the security updates. I get security updates every month on my Nexus phone. Because it's made and produced by Google, it is pure Android. It will always get the latest software immediately. It always gets the latest updates, the latest security patches. The manufacturers are not, because they aren't sold through the manufacturers and they're not sold through the phone companies. The other thing you get when you buy a pure Google phone is you get no bloatware, what's called bloatware. A long time ago, all these Samsungs and LGs and all this agreed to let, and you remember it on your old flip phones, to let the companies, the T-Mobiles and such, put apps on the phone so that you could check your minutes and you could buy music directly and buy ringtones directly from the manufacturers. Well, that's great and all, but it also fills up your phone with stuff you really don't care about, for the most part. But if you're going to spend, now here's the kicker, is you can go buy a Samsung what is the latest, S7, which they recall because of a problem, but go buy a Samsung S7 on contract or discounted from T-Mobile, for instance, and you pay $30-40 a month for the phone instead of having to pay $600 or $700 outright for it. You can't do that with the Nexus phones unless you pay Google directly for their cellular service, which, by the way, unlike Apple, you can buy a phone from Google, you buy a Nexus phone from them, and use Google Fi as your cellular provider. That's what I do. It's not the cheapest option. There are cheaper options out there. Especially if you're a heavy data user, I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not a heavy cellular data user because I have Wi-Fi everywhere. So I don't need a huge data plan. But if you are, you need to go elsewhere. But you can still buy the phone off of Google, and the Nexus, or moving forward the Pixel phones, are capable of working on any cellular provider, period, in the US. So you buy a Nexus phone, you get the equivalent of an iPhone. You get the immediate security patches, which, by the way, Android, made by Google, which is the operating system built into the Google phones, has always paid for what are called bug bounties. Apple just started doing that. So what that means is, if somebody finds a problem with an Android phone, if a hacker finds a problem with an Android phone, he has two options. He can sell that on the open market or use it and get paid to use it to hack into people's phones. Or, if he's what's called a white hat hacker, he can sell that exploit or that problem he found directly to Google. Most modern hackers are doing that because it's guaranteed paycheck. And they pay a chunk of change. It's not, honestly, you can make more if you're a black hat hacker. Just like anything else in the world, if you think you can get away with it and not get caught, you can hack things and make a lot of money from nefarious people. And eventually you'll get caught. Or you can sell it to Google. Google's going to be pretty happy with you. They're going to remember you did that, and they're going to pay you the next time you do that. And it's guaranteed. Google's been doing that for a long time, since Android was launched. And that's part of open source, Google open source, if you're interested in that. That's why, in many ways, Android is considered to be superior. So, for the most part, the features and the things that you get from Apple can be found elsewhere more cheaply. Apple devices tend to be a status symbol, and Android devices tend to be owned by the more technologically proficient and, people who understand and or who are frugal. Because quite honestly, you can go get an Android phone. It's not going to work very well, and it's not going to last very long, but you can get an Android phone for less than $100 and activate it. And you're going to have your Facebook, you're going to have your email, but if you put more than 5 or 6 apps on it, it's going to fill up and stop working pretty soon. It's going to run really slowly. So, should you? That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But, I want to give you the pros and cons in both directions. And I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of Android fanboy, although in some ways I am. I have had both. I've used both. Now, given the iPhone that I had for a very long time was provided to me by an employer. So, I didn't buy it, but I liked it. It worked. And that was the thing I did like about it. I liked it and it worked. But if I wanted to make Google my default browser, nope. If I wanted to make Chrome, I should say, my default browser, wasn't going to happen. Apple doesn't allow it. If I wanted to change the layout, the text, the font, the types of icons, where I get the music that I want to be my ringtones, nope. All that has to come from iTunes, and all the settings are pretty well locked down because they don't want you to be able to break it. They also want everyone to have a unified experience on every iPhone they touch. Hey, I get it. And that's why, after struggling with my mother for 2 years with an inexpensive Android phone, I helped her get an iPhone. So there's two different, mentalities on that. I very rarely have to help her with that iPhone. I do have to help her, but rarely. She's figuring it out pretty fast. Whereas it took her, after 2 years with that Android phone, she was still confused most of the time, and it still broke a lot, and settings would get messed up, and I'd have to help her fix it. There's a fly in this podcast. But, you can get, the same or similar specs for much cheaper. That's the other thing. Apple makes a big deal about their processor. They've got the new A10 processor that's a custom processor that they bought the rights for, modified, and put in their iPhones. Great. It's a quad-core processor. Most of the modern Android phones that are coming out at around that same price range are 8-core processors. 8 cores. So that's what I talk about. And cores just means it's faster. It can do more. It can do more things simultaneously. If you have a processor that has 4 cores, you can do roughly 4 to 5 processes simultaneously. If you've got 8 cores, you can run 7, 8 processes simultaneously. That's a rough way of saying that. There's far more technically to it than that, but that's what it breaks down to. More processors, more cores, you can do more. So Apple touting their quad-core processor is kind of like, Ford coming out with a car and saying, it can do 80 miles an hour. Yeah, so can every other car ever made from 1954 on. Great. Thanks. It doesn't mean anything. But they make it sound like it means something amazing. And that's what Apple's good at, is marketing. Apple phones are a status symbol. So in closing, basically what I want to bring to you and help you understand with this is that you have a huge plethora of choices out there, and you need to study up on what you need personally, and not take some marketing advice, and not even take my advice, and not even the advice of the techie next door. You need to figure out what you need out of your device. If you need something that generally just flat out works, doesn't have any problems, and if you're willing to live in the Apple ecosystem almost exclusively, and when I mean Apple ecosystem, it's going to work best if you own an iPhone, an iPod, and a Macintosh computer, or Mac as they're called. That's how it's going to work best, because all those things talk to each other perfectly. Then get an iPhone. Now, you don't have to buy a Macintosh just because you have an iPhone. It'll work. You'll have some issues here and there, but it'll work. If you install iTunes on your PC, it'll work. iTunes is their software that communicates with the iPhone. Now, if you want something that just gives you the capability and open possibilities to do anything you want to do, if you later need to make that phone do something that it wasn't intended for, you will find a huge opportunity available to you on the Android end of things. And even if you buy a locked down phone with Android, if you buy a phone from a manufacturer, if you buy a Samsung phone through T-Mobile, you're going to get a T-Mobile branded Samsung phone, which is going to have Samsung apps and it's going to have T-Mobile apps on it. There are ways to remove all that, but you've got to be technically proficient to do it. There are ways to put completely different operating systems on those phones, but you've got to be technically proficient to do it. So if you are someone, but you don't have to be, I want to come back off of that a little bit too, because you don't have to be technically proficient to use an Android phone. It functions at its base the same way that an Apple phone does. You turn the phone on, you see an app, you click that app, it opens up, and you are able to use it. And more, if you're getting the apps that are the more popular apps, the more frequently used apps, those apps work flawlessly. You don't have to worry about problems. And also more and more, the Android operating system built into the Google phones is more and more stable and in some ways superior in functionality to Apple. Basically, all I'm telling you is don't buy into the hoopla. I want to give you the technology information and let you decide. I want to help you understand this. Now, if I haven't done a good job of that, or if there's a way I could have presented this to you better, please send me an email, feedback@commonamerican.com. One thing I want to go into here, this fly is driving me up the wall, boys and girls, I tell you. So the next thing I want to do, which I'm going to do every week, is I'm going to do an informative segment. So I'm going to call this right now for the moment the informative segment. I want to talk to you about phishing scams. This is something I felt the need to talk to my mom about here very recently. The phishing, spelled P-H-I-S-I-N-G, comes in many, many forms. The old way of saying this might be to call it a snake oil salesman. One of the more common things that I am seeing in the IT world, and it's hitting us at the IT level, but it's also hitting the average user, is you suddenly get a pop-up on your computer screen that says, you have a virus. Microsoft And it'll say something to the effect of, Microsoft has detected a virus on your computer. Call Microsoft support at insert 800 number for help. Unfortunately, Microsoft never does that. That number you're calling, that pop-up you got, is fake. That number you're calling, you're going to get somebody over in India who is then going to access your computer, log into your computer, and show you something on your computer that looks bad. And then from there, he's going to charge you $200 to $300, if not more, to fix it. And what he's going to do is install proprietary software on your computer that may take it over, and he may even put a virus on your computer. And not only did you just lose money, but you may have lost the integrity of your computer completely. And phishing scams, all a phishing scam is they are making you think that what you are doing is legitimate. So that's one form of phishing scam. Another one is you get an email that looks very official with your bank's logo on it that says you need to log into your bank account and change your password. Except it's not from your bank. It's from somebody else. And they've made it look extremely official. And what you've just done is you've logged into this other person's or other company's website, and you have put your password into their database now. So they're going to take your password, log into your bank, and do a wire transfer. So anytime you get any kind of email like that, you need to be suspicious of it. And you need to call your bank directly on the phone number on the back of your debit card, not through any other phone number provided to you anywhere else. Even if you think you're logged into your bank's website and there's a phone number on there, and you're not sure, if you followed the link that was in that email and you're calling the phone number on the website you clicked the link to, you're calling the company that's trying to fake you out. So you need to contact your bank. Anytime you get something from a company you do business with or use that you are uncertain about, you need to call a known phone number for that company and ask them, is this legitimate? Because unfortunately there are bad actors in this world, and there always have been. This is not a new thing, by the way. See, when someone gets burnt by this, and I don't want to sound callous, when someone gets burnt by one of these things, I always go in the back of my mind to the snake oil salesman. That is a centuries-old concept. This is nothing new. There have always been bad actors. There have always been people who will do nefarious things to you and to your friends and family. And it has always been common sense that if you are willing and want to protect yourself, you need to be proactive. That is part of life. If you don't understand that, I'm sorry. Now, I've included in the show notes, but I'm going to say this website also verbally on the podcast because this is the most important website you can have. There's two I'm going to give you. First of all, I'm going to tell you, if you want to see what scams are out there, you need to open your web browser and go to www.ftc.gov/ which is the one with a question mark next to it on your keyboard. So www.consumer.ftc.gov/ scam-alerts. Now, I'm going to include that in the show notes, but I wanted to verbally give that website out on the podcast because not everybody's going to know how to do that. I want you to go to that website because that is a comprehensive list that the Federal Trade Commission from our government keeps up to date. That's the best place to look. The other one I want you to go to, and this is more for your passwords, is I want you to pull up your web browser, go to Google, and search for "Have I Been Pwned?" Now, that's a weird one, and it's a sort of it's a new agey, techie term, to be pwned. What that essentially means is have I been hacked? But have I been pwned, and it's not spelled properly, because, hey, millennials, what are you going to do? It's have I been PWND. PWND. Have I been pwned? Now, when you go there, you're going to get a pretty good selection. When you Google that, you're going to get a good selection. Just click on the first link. Have I been pwned? And then it's going to ask you to put in email addresses that you've used or currently use, and it's going to tell you if any of your passwords have been basically hacked. It's going to tell you what websites were hacked, because unfortunately all these websites out there are getting hacked. Next week's show, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about protecting yourself from password hacking problems like that. But that's next week's tip. But Have I Been Pwned is the best website out there and it's actually I think it's haveibeenpwned.com, by the way. I think you could just go to haveibeenpwned.com, but it's easier to Google Have I Been Pwned or something like that. But look for PWND, and that's, again, millennials, what are you going to do? But go there and go to the FTC website. Take a look at modern phishing scams, and I feel the need to bring this to you because it's not just I know guys that are in my field that have been caught by phishing scams. It's not that people, I think, are gullible. I think that nowadays we're getting so much content that sometimes we don't know what's real and what isn't. I've never been, thankfully, hit by a phishing scam. I'm pretty proactive. But I got close once. I thought about it and then realized it was fake and didn't do it. Didn't click on a link. I got an email from my bank and I looked at it. I almost clicked the link. And I looked at it and said, no, that's not right. Something's not right here. And I called my bank. And they said, sure enough, that's a phishing scam. It's so prevalent that there's tools now that enterprise organizations are using to prevent it. Phishing is a huge problem. At work, we have a tool built into our email. If we feel that an email we've received might be a phishing scam, we hit a single button built into our email, into Outlook. It reports it to corporate IT that this email that was sent to me is either a scam or a spam email of some kind. Because we also don't like spam at work. That's bad. So in conclusion, that's where we're at. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about modern technology, where we're at. Every week I'll break down one of the major stories of the week, let you guys know what I think about it, tell you where I think things are moving with technology, and then give you a breakdown and give you maybe 5 or 6 points of that. I'm going to try to keep it to one story because this already has been a pretty long episode. It's already taken me, probably the better part of an hour now to get to where I'm at, maybe 45 minutes to get to where I'm at with this. So if I did 2 stories, obviously the episode might get a little bit too long. So what I want you to do is go to commonamerican.com. So our email address is feedback@commonamerican.com. If you think I'm wrong about something I said, or if you just want to hear your own voice on the podcast, you can call me. My phone number is 737-808-COM1. That's 737-808-2661, 737-808-COM1. I'm your serial technologist here. I'm TextJeb on Twitter, TXJEB on Twitter. Catch the show live Saturdays at around 11. Hopefully next week I'll be able to get the show launched a little bit quicker. This week it took a little longer than I expected, but hey, it happened. I got it done. Until next time.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Common American Podcast. To find out more about our show, go to www.commonamerican.com. You can get in touch with us, email us, call us, tweet us, support us, and berate us from the various links there. Common American is an independent production. Remember, support your independent artists and content creators.